There are a lot of toxic ways to approach arguments in relationships or marriage, especially when things are going through a rough patch, such as a separation or a divorce. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the one method that can de-escalate any argument powerfully and start turning your relationships around. So this method is called the HEAT method, and it's a step-by-step conversation technique that can be used to help diffuse a heated situation or an argument. So HEAT is an acronym, and it stands for Hear, Empathize, Agree, and Take Ownership. Now, although these steps are very simple, it's really important to understand what each step does and how to use it. And in order to do that, it's important to understand the origin of arguments and where they actually come from. So what are the source of conflicts and how do they happen in the first place? Well, a lot of people overcomplicate this, but there are actually only two real types of conflicts in relationships. Conflicts around logic and conflicts around emotions. Now, logical conflicts are simple differences between two human beings. You know, I wanted to go to Applebee's tonight, you wanted to go to Chili's, I like blue in the bedroom, you want it painted green, I think 50 Shades of Grey is a great book, you think it's trash. All of these are logical conflicts, simple reasoning disagreements between people. But the reason why arguments escalate is because when you do disagree on the logical conflicts, then you come in with a logical response. And there are lots of different types of logical responses. There's rebutting, which is when you present a contradicting point of view, you shoot down an idea or opinion without listening to the original point, or even cutting someone off. This is a very active form of resistance to your partner's expressions, right? And it's quite aggressive and it deflects away from the original point because you're arguing with logic. Then there's explaining, which is using all of your words to talk about why your partner's wrong or why your point is right. And again, this is a very active form of resistance to your partner's ideas. You're using even more logic. You're doubling down on the idea that this is a logical discussion. You're giving a lecture to an audience who are there to talk about something else. Well, then there's defending. So defending is when you get defensive, you act like someone has attacked you, usually by sort of standing up for yourself. You're playing the high value card. And again, this is an active form of resisting against your partner's ideas. And this feels very powerful in the moment, but it's actually quite a weak action. This is where you sort of play the victim card, you feel threatened or you criticize. And these logical responses are often a natural response to something that we disagree with. This is a lot of people's default. It's kind of like, you know, when you're in school and you have a debating society, this response that you have is kind of like that. You're arguing at a very logical level. So I'm rebutting your facts with my facts and only one of us can win. It becomes a very zero-sum game where there's one winner and one loser. And this is why it's crucially important to be aware that logical conflicts can escalate into something different. So why do logical responses not work? Well, these responses try to manipulate the conversation. They deflect from the original point. They break trust emotionally. These logical responses lead to negative feedback loops. It's kind of like the fighting fire with fire. There is no winner in this. It ends up causing more arguments. These negative feedback loops escalate and actually historically start to cause more and more distrust with your partner in you because these logical responses cause emotional problems on top of the logical problems. So as you can see now, on top of the logical problem, you've created an emotional problem. And by continually arguing logically, then you'll build up more and more emotional problems between you on top of that. So what's an example of how this looks? Well, let's say your partner says, hey, we should hold off taking the car to the shop today. Let's take it there Sunday. And you respond with, no, it has to be taken in today. I need to drive it on Sunday. Boom, there's the first logical response. It's small, but it's there. You responded logically. So then your partner says, for example, you know, I'm worried about the cash flow. I don't want to be caught with no money when we're having the mortgage coming out on Sunday too. This is a goldmine. Your partner has given you a clue here. They've told you their feelings. They're talking on an emotional level. So you can choose to respond in logic or you can choose to respond with emotion. So let's say you continue to respond in a logical way where you say, hey, I get paid Saturday. Don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. Again, you come in with logic explaining why your partner shouldn't be worried. So as there's more and more back and forth, as you continue to respond with logic, the argument starts to escalate more as you both are trying to still talk about the logical problem when now it's become an emotional problem. The layer around the outside of the logic has become bigger and bigger. The emotional layer has become bigger and bigger around the logic, and neither partner is addressing it. So we need that context in mind as we break down the HEAT method and how it works. So using the HEAT method is effective in de-escalating arguments. And I'll jump into some real life scenarios after this to help you see how flexible this is. Now, ideally, we want to start trying to get ahead of arguments to prevent them from even starting. So leave a comment below if you want me to create a video on how to do that. But when an argument has already escalated, we always want to be addressing the emotional layer, not the logical layer. And this is really crucial to understand because oftentimes we, especially if you're a guy, sorry guys, we don't want to back down from a fight, right? It becomes a very us versus them. We want to stick our heels in and we want to continue to argue the logical layer. But when an argument has escalated, it's already shifted. And it's important to recognize and address that as soon as you can. So using the heat method, the first thing to do is to hear. So hearing is simply hearing your partner out, giving them the complete space to express their feelings, their ideas, their opinions in any way they feel. Now, a lot of people think that letting someone speak their point of view is a sign of weakness, but it's actually one of the most powerful things that you can do. Think about it this way. Which one is weak? Letting someone voice their point of view, a point of view that they have, whether you hear it or not, or being unable to even hear your partner's point of view? Which one of those is the weaker one? If you think about it, if you are so fragile that you're unable to hear somebody else's point of view, that is a very weak position to be in. So it's important to shift your mindset in that respect of simply being able to hear out your partner is the first crucial step. So give your partner the full room to express whatever they want to express in whatever the way they see fit, whether you agree with it or not. This is not about being right or wrong. This is about being able to gather the data, gather feelings on your partner's opinion. And by hearing your partner's opinion, you're giving value to your partner because they can express themselves. And you also gain value because you're able to gather a more valuable insight into what your partner is thinking and feeling. The more data you have on this, the better a partner you'll be able to be. And it's really crucial in this first step to not jump in with your opinions, your feelings, your ideas. This will immediately start to take the heat down. And this doesn't mean that you have to stay silent. You can do active listening, which if you don't know about, I'll link to the video which I've done on it above. But active listening can be a very powerful way of still listening to your partner without jumping in with your own opinion. The next step is to empathize. And this is where it's really important not to be even remotely looking at the logical element of this challenge right now. We're looking here at the emotional element that's been built up. So if you focus on the logical element, you'll be creating more damage. It's crucial to direct your brain to the emotional level of what is being said here. So, understanding, reading, and acknowledging emotions in conflict resolution is a really crucial skill and one that you'll need to be able to master to be able to succeed in relationships. And if you do want a deeper dive on all of this, then join us on my free relationship bootcamp, where you'll learn more of these skills and also have the chance to be able to work with me to directly craft a thriving relationship for yourself and start turning your relationship around. So to empathize with the feelings around the logic, pause and acknowledge what your partner may be feeling right now. Put yourself in their shoes and think about what they are feeling as you've been hearing them out. So, for example, from what you just told me, I imagine you're feeling pretty pissed off that I stepped on your point earlier and just kind of took over the conversation. In fact, I think that if I were you, I may even be worried that this is part of a larger trend because it's something that I've done before. You see, empathizing with your partner and why they may be upset right now helps to bring the temperature down even further, because in you empathizing, this means that they don't have to shout to be heard as much. They don't have to try to explain over and over because you've already started to acknowledge why they may be feeling what they're feeling. Next is agree. Now, some of you may hear this and think, well, this would be a lie. I don't agree with what my partner's saying. But to be clear, you don't need to agree with the logical side of things right now because the argument is no longer about that. You're agreeing with the feelings behind it. So as you develop the skills to be able to dig deeper into your partner's feelings, you develop the skills to put yourself in your partner's shoes and understand why they are feeling what they're feeling. You're not saying, I feel the same way as you. You're saying, if I were you with your experiences, I would be feeling the way that you are feeling right now. You're saying, I would feel that same way too, and deeply validating your partner's feelings. Finally, take ownership. This is the most crucial step, is to take ownership of the situation. This doesn't necessarily mean to give a solution to the logical challenge right now, especially when emotions are high. But taking ownership could be returning to the conversation at another convenient time, taking ownership of learning how to manage your emotions better, taking ownership of asking more questions and developing a win-win together. It's essentially developing a plan to move forward that addresses both partners' concerns. Now, this can just be short-term, just to be able to move forward from this argument, but you need to start thinking long-term too. So using the heat method, how does this look? So first I want to show you how it can be used before I jump into how it shouldn't be used. So let's say we're using the example of before, where your partner said, we should hold off taking the car to the shop today. Let's take it there on Sunday. So let's say you've stopped and you've let your partner express themselves funny. Think about what the most important point that they're saying in this conversation is and validate it. So you've been thinking about the money situation and it's looking a little tight in the account right now. This is active listening. This is paraphrasing. This is taking the most important point of what they're saying, and this is verifying with them that that's what they're actually saying. Then empathize. I imagine you're feeling a little scared about money, especially with the way that things have been for us in the past. It probably feels a little touch and go right now. This is empathizing with the feelings of what's being said, not the logic. Then agree. I'd feel the same way as you. Then take ownership. How about we both take a look at the account together and figure out what would be the best time to take the car in? What do you think? You see, with this, we're addressing the emotional layer before you even think about addressing the logical layer. And the first 3 steps in this can be repeated as much as you need to in order to keep de-escalating the situation. So what are the pitfalls that you can fall into in trying to execute the heat method? So let's break down these pitfalls and then we'll talk about how to avoid them. The first pitfall is that in the first part of the heat method, maybe you try to hear, but you're still interrupting. If you're like me and you have ADHD, it can be really easy to focus on the logic rather than the emotion during this time. But if you focus on the logic, then you'll continue to do the logical responses that we mentioned earlier on in this video. Getting caught up in the logical layer will lead to these damaging responses and continue to slowly erode trust in your partner over time. Another pitfall could be on the empathize step. It can be maybe a very shallow response because, again, your brain is focused on the logic rather than the emotions. And this is a habit that needs to be bred out of your system because it's really easy for the brain to be tricked into thinking logically in conversations, to get tied up in the logic. So starting to switch your default to emotions when it comes to conversations is really important. And this is why it's really important now to start being proactive to avoid these pitfalls, getting ahead of them so that you don't have to think about it in the moment. This is not simply a matter of, I tried it once and it doesn't work. It's never what you do, it's how you do it. So making sure that you're practicing this and raising your standard to start rewiring your brain and your default response in a different way in order to get different results. Remember that with communication, it's never just about learning one skill. It's about learning and taking action on multiple skills, multiple relationship skills in order to start turning your relationship around, to be able to avoid arguments, to be able to stop causing damage and to save your relationship. And if you want a breakdown of the 4 crucial relationship skills, then I will leave you with this video right here. I'll see you over there.